Hello and welcome to a fresh, revamped sprinkler talk from Project Fire. You might remember a few years ago we did a YouTube channel which we called Sprinkler Talk, where I was talking to camera about a range of sprinkler topics. We ended up with around 24 hours worth of content on that YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, it's still up there. It's still a good source of information about sprinklers. Some of that information is now going to be a little bit out of date. So for example, we had the 9251 code standard update in 2021. So some of the residential things is going to be out of date now. So we're kind of moving it forward. We're also changing the format. So instead of just me talking to camera, it's going to be, now I've got some guests with me, we're going to have more of a conversation, like an interview, a podcast style of doing things. And hopefully that can be more interesting to watch and listen to. And also we get to hear other people's experiences, other people's points of view about working in sprinklers and some of the aspects surrounding sprinklers and how it fits into the wider kind of building and construction environment. The topic today is going to be about the hierarchy of different roles that you'd find on a construction site. All the way down from maybe fitter's mate, all the way up to the project manager, and then the people above them, the people that the M&E contractor, the main contractor, and then ultimately the client right at the very top of the tree. So it's a question of coordination, about how to kind of manage these different aspects, how to work with other services as well. All of that is going to be discussed in this upcoming podcast. So today I'm pleased to welcome Ben Goodwin to our podcast. Welcome to our new studio that we've carved out here at Project Fire.
Nice.
So for those that don't know you, do you want to just explain kind of who you are, what your background in sprinklers is, how long you've been working in the industry, that sort of thing?
So I started at Project Fire about 7 years ago, as you should say, you remember. I've moved around a couple of different companies within the industry, predominantly within the service and the rapid contracts side of the industry. Really enjoyed it. Quite fast paced. That's sort of what I've enjoyed.
Yeah, always busy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's me.
Cool. Okay, so today's topic is to do with kind of site management and looking at the kind of the hierarchy, the structure, the different characters, the different roles that you would find on a site.
Yep.
So for example, I mean the quotation stage is a big topic on its own. We're going to be talking about that in a future episode. But yeah, let's say that we've gone through that. We've won the contract.
Yep. Now
it's kind of okay. What happens from that point of view?
So once the contract has been won and secured, as you say, and we've all celebrated with champagne, the project manager would probably be the first person to visit site. Occasionally a project engineer. It depends on the size of the site, but let's presume it's a relatively large site. The project manager would go to site at the earliest occasion that he can or they can to go and see the progress of the site, see when it's imagined we would be going to site for the first time.
I was going to ask you that in terms of the time distance from winning the contract to actually starting works. I guess that'll depend on lots of
it can vary, and a lot of the time when it's quoted there will have been a programme of works or a very basic one. The likelihood is that doesn't end up being the case and it ends up falling out of that line, and there'll probably be a new programme of works from when it's all all the M&E contracts put in place and everybody's aware of who's doing what, and the project manager's job at this stage is to go to site and check that seems reasonable, and that we're not set to start on site in 2 weeks and there's no part of the building built yet, for example. It's ready, and we don't want to send anybody to site with the site not ready for us to start installing sprinklers yet.
Absolutely, that'd be a waste of everyone's time.
It would be a complete waste, yeah.
And I guess that the project manager is going to have a lot of meetings to kind of talk about the kind of the nitty-gritty stuff, the really kind of in detail bits where in the quotation you've assumed various things and now you need to actually look at the fine detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously you would hope that any any little things that have been missed from the quote stage will have been picked up at design stage, but that's not always going to be the case, and things might change. Obviously, a big part of them going to site for the first time is to meet the site management team. They'll obviously have to have a good relationship, hopefully, because through the project they'll be working well. And if there are any issues and there's that good relationship there, then hopefully those issues can be resolved. So they'll be going to site checking that the drawings that they've been given from the designers match from what they can see. So and any issues will be picked up early. So there's hopefully not bigger issues later down the line.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the drawing side of things, because the drawings used at the quotation stage are essentially put in the bin and you kind of start again.
Yeah, because at quotation stage you're marking up a rough number of heads. You may be over allowing in some areas because there might be small changes, and let's say you've got 500 heads at the end of it. When you do the design, it might come out at 480, it might come out at 520. You hope it's favourable. So you start again if you like, and those designs may have slightly changed at that point.
Okie dokie. So what about the kind of the on-site hierarchy of different people? So who is the site manager? Sorry, the project manager. Who are you meeting at the kind of the early stages?
The site manager normally, assuming they're on site. They may have a site management team. Once again, it depends on the site.
And what's their role, the site manager?
Their role is to make sure that everybody's doing what they should be doing, to put it simply, and to be the mediator a lot of the time for the issues that are on site. So if you've got different services saying I should be here, and sprinklers, for example, saying oh no, we should be here, then they sort of mediate and come up with the solution, and it's their decision to get those things resolved, basically.
So you'd expect the site manager to have a kind of a broad understanding of construction and the different elements, but isn't a specialist in any.
No, exactly. They have to know a lot, a good amount about a lot. They have to be able to hold the conversations within all the different sectors of whatever it might be on site. And as I say, a lot of the time it's understanding from their perspective the importance. So, for example, sprinklers, they have to go in the place they have to go not for aesthetic reasons, but because of regulations, whereas lighting layouts, for example, might be just for an aesthetic perspective. So they've got to have that understanding of the importance of the different services as well.
So on a kind of day-to-day basis, who are you actually reporting to when you're on site? You're actually installing sprinklers, the pipes going in, the heads are going in. Who are you kind of ordering to? So
if you're an installer, you're obviously going to speak to the project manager about any issues and updates. That project manager then has the M&E contractor, which will be either the site manager on site, or that might be somebody based externally that's going to want updates on the how we're getting on. And then there's also the main contractor as well, who may come to you and say, especially if there's a large issue, you may be speaking to them about your concerns, or they might be speaking to you about their concerns. So there's a hierarchy as far as that's concerned.
And I guess the bigger the project, the more layers you're going to have.
Absolutely.
In there.
Yeah, you'll have site managers, then you'll have like projects directors from different areas. You'll obviously have QSs that will be involved as well, and then you may even be speaking to people who specialise in other services within the M&E or even the main contractor because of issues.
Well, that's right. I mean, let's unpack that. So M&E, mechanical and electrical.
Yeah.
So what other things would come under that umbrella?
So plumbing, so you've got your domestic water, you've obviously got your electrics, your emergency lighting, your general lighting layout, and then you've also got your other fire needs as well, so your fire alarm, your smoke detectors. All of those services have got to go above the ceiling most of the time.
Well, that's right.
That as much as you can design and pre-design and do it as you want to, that will never quite go as planned. So the communication between those different sectors is important.
Yeah, that's right. In a way, you're a team. You're all doing the servicing for the building, the services, but equally you're kind of competing for space a little bit, aren't you? And that's all down to coordination. So tell us a little bit about that.
So you hope in nowadays that a 3D Revit model has been done.
That's the idea.
That's ideal, because it leaves less chance for there to be clashes. But even with the best will in the world, you're going to have some. You're going to have some sometimes where the M&E contractor decides, or the main contractor decides, that they want a different light fitting, or they want 2 lights in a room where there was only 1, or whatever it might be, and suddenly that clashes with your sprinkler head, and then you've got the issue of, well, can my sprinkler move if it's not been installed yet and still be compliant? And if it can't, well, the likelihood is the lighting has to move, because that's not a compliance problem, that's an aesthetic problem, and compliance has got to come first. And normally that decision is made by the site manager.
Yes. I mean, I think that the very best client will be a client who knows exactly what they want from the start and never changes their mind.
Yeah,
I guess.
If you've got one of those, then that's great.
That'll be ideal.
That doesn't always happen. So,
no. Who gets to kind of decide which service goes in first? Because that's what you want, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everyone wants to go first, right?
Yeah, and that's normally should be done with the schedule of works prior to that, with the QSs and the site team getting involved prior to anybody going on site at all. And they should look at it in terms of who needs to go in first and when. The problem that you sometimes have with sprinklers is it can occasionally be a bit of an afterthought, whether it be the type of building originally didn't need them, and suddenly it's then been decided that either they need them or they're going to put them in. And that might happen after other services have gone in. So if it was decided from the start that sprinklers would have gone in, you'd have maybe been one of the first in. Now you're not, you're one of the last in, and that creates the issues it creates.
Yes, I can imagine that. So you mentioned the schedule of works there several times. So I guess that's kind of what you're getting marked against, right? You know, if you're keeping up with the schedule of works, you're doing a good job. If you're not, then
exactly. And there can be huge implications from a company perspective if you don't. So if it's down to you as in the sprinkler contractor, and you're the reason that the project is falling behind that schedule of works, and it is your fault, for want of a better term, then there can be financial penalties for that. So that's vitally important, and it's important that is looked at the start and deemed when the project manager goes to site for the first time, or certainly the second time. They're looking at that thinking, is this a reasonable expectation to have all this done? And if it's not, that it's raised early, because that can cause big issues if that doesn't happen. Yeah,
it seems like a good site manager is a bit of a lawyer as well, aren't they? They're kind of keeping a track of all these things that have gone wrong, all these things. Well, that's why I'm now behind, because all these things beyond your control.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got to try and look into the future a little bit and think, well, I've got a week to finish this floor. Is that a reasonable? Is that reasonable? And if not, well, I need to say it as early as possible. So if I need 7 or 8 days, then everybody on site knows that.
Yep. Okay, well, let's talk about the hierarchy in terms of sprinklers then. So I'm guessing we've got a fitter's mate would be the kind of the first rung on the ladder, where does it go from there?
So it depends on the company. Some companies will have fitters mates, and then they will have your main lead fitters. A lot of companies have like an intermediary role, which is an improver, some call it. And that's somebody who's got experience of fitting sprinklers, maybe isn't a fully fledged fitter yet, maybe isn't making sure that the fitters mates are doing what they should be, and there to help them, but they can work on their own and they can crack on, and it's a sort of intermediate step. Especially on larger sites, you might have 1 or 2 lead fitters, and then you might have multiple improvers and fitters mates with them. So it gives that rung in between for progress, and means there isn't just that huge step from being a fitter's mate to being a fitter. But not everyone does that, and it depends on the site. If you've got a pair of engineers, which you normally do, you may well just have a fitter and a fitter's mate.
And then above them is some sort of supervisor?
Yeah, you'll have, once again, depending on the project size, but you might well have a project engineer who the lead fitter will be speaking to. They will visit site potentially multiple times a week to check on progress. And then above them you'll have the project manager and then the project director. Now, generally the project director, unless there's a big issue, wouldn't be going to site.
That's right.
The project manager, as you get further up the ladder, the less likely that person needs to go to site regularly. That's the idea.
Yes, because the project manager has got multiple projects on the go at the same time.
Exactly, and they probably can't get round them all, or certainly need to concentrate on the issues rather than just checking on progress, and that's where the project engineers come in, and then the project directors obviously then got all of the projects, and they're after a general update and there to solve any large problems.
That's right. Yeah, and I think something that we're doing in the industry is improving training and education for every level of kind of sprinkler people that are kind of interacting with the sprinklers, because it does make a difference. You've got to understand the fact that the design is important, and if something isn't right in the drawing, you can't just kind of make it up on the spur of the moment, can you?
No.
It's got to have to be checked.
It's got to be pre-checked, and I think that's especially with the changes that you mentioned right at the start with 9251. That means that whereas before it was a relatively straightforward in terms of your spacing was the spacing in every room. Now, because of the new regulations that have come in, it's imperative that people are checking the people have the capability to check and know the spacings in all the different areas, so they can be checking as they're installing them, rather than finding out after they've been installed and the ceilings are done and it's all painted that there's a problem. And that's what you want to try and avoid.
So, have you got a good story maybe to share where different groups of people have had to kind of get involved, where there's been an issue, and that kind of hierarchy has come into play? Yeah,
and it sort of leads into what I was just talking about regarding the spacings, and it's how important it is that every level of anybody installing sprinklers or involved in the sprinklers knows the regulations well enough to be able to pull up a problem. We had a site in Manchester where, to start with, all the bathrooms throughout the entire building were less than 5 square metres.
Okay, that's the important figure, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They were 4.7, 4.8. They were within tolerance to not need to be protected. This was prior to any of the newer standards coming out regarding any of
there's a few extra rules now.
Exactly. This is on the older regulations. And what happened is they decided, the site decided, whether, I don't know if it was the M&E contract or the main contract, they just decided that they were going to make some of the bathrooms on each of the floors accessible for wheelchair use, and which is completely understandable. And when they did that, it meant that the bathrooms became slightly larger. Now, this wasn't mentioned by anybody because I think unless it's sprinklers, it's not something that normally makes a difference. And it meant that the bathrooms became 5.2-ish metres squared, so therefore needed protecting. Fortunately, the fitter's mate who was on site, who was installing it, looked at it and thought, this looks slightly different layout, and decided to measure it up and made the designer aware of that, or made the installer aware of this, who then let the designer know. The designer checked it and asked for updated drawings, and it turned out that it was above the 5 square metres. And obviously by doing that and noticing it early, it meant that we were able to protect that while we were doing the rest of the room and before the ceilings went up. And that was the correct way of doing it. Yes. Had that not happened, it would have caused quite a big headache for the M&E contractor to resolve at the end of the day. It wouldn't have been the sprinkler.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would have been a big mess, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I guess somebody might have said to the sprinkler designer, sprinkler installer, "You've done this wrong. This should be protected." And well, we didn't know because the drawing said this, and
exactly, and that's why it's so important that the drawings get approved from the start as well. Because if they're not approved, then it's difficult to say whose responsibility it is. But as long as the designer has sent it off and they've been pre-approved before we've installed anything, we've installed to drawing. So that was a good way of showing how important it is that everybody on site knows the rules and the regulations and can pick up on any issues.
That's right.
Another story that is quite a common one within the industry is when we go in first. I say we as the sprinkler contractor.
Indeed,
we're going first, and we're first fixing our sprinkler heads, or certainly our pipe work with our adapters, to a certain ceiling height. That ceiling height is normally pre-agreed. Well, will be pre-agreed. Hopefully approved in the drawings.
Quite a key measurement, right?
It's very key. And sometimes you might, depending on how the installation's being done, you might even be second fixing at that stage as well, depending on what ceiling's going in and things. So it's vitally important, because that might be your only visit to do it. I've had it on many sites where for various different reasons the ceiling height ends up being different, and therefore the sprinkler head location is either too high or too low. It could be because, and it has been, because the slab is maybe slightly out of tolerance.
Right, yeah, I suppose everything has got a tolerance
exactly,
to it.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised how difficult it is to get over from one side of the building to the other on quite a large building. You could be a good few mil out, which obviously sends your sprinkler heads out. Or it could just be that either there's been a miscommunication, or the design's changed and nobody's been made aware of it, or the relevant people haven't been made aware of it. So all the sprinklers get installed on a floor at a certain height, the ceiling goes in, and either the sprinklers are dangling down below the ceiling, or that you can't see them and they're above the ceiling, and that's quite a common problem. And once again, that's the importance of having drawings that are approved and everybody's aware. And coming back to the site manager, noticing that and making it, a good site manager is somebody who's going to notice that as the ceiling is going in, why are the sprinklers not either there, or why are they dangling below, and noticing that before it becomes a really big issue once all the ceilings are.
Yes, and then again, you're back to your kind of lawyer, aren't you? You say, well, our drawings say that this is the measurement, and
and where's that come from? And there's normally, hopefully, there's a trail there, and it leads to at least finding the person, I'm going to say, responsible, because that's important to understand whose job it is to put it right.
Because I mean, there's going to be a lot of time and labour to fix it, and who's paying for that?
Exactly, and you've got to know, and that's the importance of making sure things are documented and written down and signed and whatnot.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up for today. So thank you to my guest Ben Goodwin, we do get in touch with us. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, in particular, do get in touch with us and tell us ideas for future episodes, maybe you've got suggestions for other guests that we could bring into the studio and talk to. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.